Peace and blessings, family. A lovely, warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining me here today. My name is Dalian Adofo. I am the co-founder of the Ancestral Voices Educational Initiative. This is part one of the learning program, the Transformative Self. And what is the Transformative Self? The Transformative Self is a 6-part video lecture series that expounds on the notions in African cosmologies of personhood, inherent divinity, and direct connection to natural and cosmic forces. This series explores ancestral knowledge systems' understanding of the constituents of the human body, mind, and spirit, and its connection to the universe and the cosmic forces. It also draws further on recent quantum scientific discoveries that are uncovering similar. It challenges us to extend our understanding of self beyond mere flesh and blood, and how to apply this knowledge in order to have a more affirming and correlative life experience. The first theme we're going to be exploring in detail is for us all to recognize and to be a force of nature. And when I mentioned the force of nature, we're talking about the same natural phenomena that we see played out daily in our external environment, be it the weather patterns, the waters, oceans, lakes, rivers, rain. Yep, all these forces that we know that exist within nature, electricity. I'm imploring us to be a force of nature. While that might sound a bit unfamiliar, let's delve into it some more to understand why, in actuality, we are all forces of nature and have a direct and intimate connection to the universe itself. And we're no different from the forces that also exist within it, because we are an extension of the universe. We know the universe is a constantly transformative space, ever expanding space, where cosmic forces and pulls on one planetary body invariably affects others in the cosmos. In the African conception, this idea of interconnectivity is referred to as Ubuntu. I'll just leave that there, and then we take it further as we discuss this in greater detail. The universe is also a place where galaxies, stars, and planets are born, full of visible and invisible aspects that exist in the symbiotic system. It is a place where galaxies, stars, and planets are born, full of visible and invisible aspects that exist in a symbiotic system. So we come back to the idea of symbiosis, this interconnection and interplay between things. When we say visible, we can see the planetary bodies and the moon, stars. But we also know there happens to be invisible aspects. And when we say invisible, we're talking of be a phenomena we call black holes, dark energy, dark matter, all these, even melanin, because this is one of the key other aspects that some scientists are exploring. The very fact of melanin being a subspace matter is the word they're throwing around these days. When we say invisible, it just means really, to us, the human perception, we haven't really perceived it in its entirety. Okay? But the universe is composed of both these aspects to its state of being. How does that relate to the human body? You may be wondering. And the first thing I'll even mention is one of the key ancient universal principles from the Nile Valley, the principle of correspondence. And that states, as above, so below. The human body is likewise affected by multiple forces and processes that affect our growth, well-being, and existence in society. It is a place where ideas and concepts are born, and we also are composed of visible and invisible aspects. The same centrifugal and gravitational forces that affect planetary bodies also affect the human being. But yet, how is this so? Is the human being a planet? A very interesting question that we need to ask ourselves, and that is precisely what this entire course series will be covering in detail. Let's not forget that there are prominent neuroscientists and other psychologists and astrophysicists now playing with the term planetary force or body to refer to the human being, when this wasn't so a few decades ago. Yeah? How is the human being a planet? This is what we're going to cover. Let's look at the visible aspects of the human being first of all. On a physical level, the same most chemically active elements in the universe also seamlessly interfaces the human body as well as our environment on Earth. And these elements, we're all familiar with most of them: hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen. And some of them, we don't have access to them. Our life is pretty much in immediate danger. Okay, so this is where on the physical level we can get our first correlation. And for me, really, my job is done then. If I could just say that, we already have it. There you go. The elements are pretty much the same. We reflect them internally as well as externally. But there's more to the story. But the first truth then that we come to perceive just on that physical level is why it is held in African spirituality that the human being is a microcosm of the universe, which is the macrocosm. So the human being is the small version of the universe itself, which is the bigger version. Once upon a time, such an assertion was laughed at as being superstitious, but yet today it's at the cutting edge of our technological progress. These are the discoveries that we're finding, and there's no astrophysicist who can disagree with these constituents of the human body. Maybe that's why they're using the term now. Also, one of those key core elements gives us a clue as to the extended aspect of the human being, which is that we are transformative beings in essence. Yes, this is what forces are, forces of nature. We transform not just ourselves but also things. And when we look into the elements that are in our makeup, carbon is the element that gives us our first indication as to the transformative nature of the human being. Because if we look to the image on the left, this is all of us, our portraits about 100 years from now, and as we can see, our physical matter decomposes over time, including those bones. Eventually, we become no different to the earth that surrounds what once held a portion of us. Yeah? And our bodies over time will decompose and can create any of these, from a diamond to charcoal, or different aspects of coal, or different aspects of fossilized specimens within the earth, rocks, boulders, and so on. So our inherent state of being carbon already shows us how we change over time. Okay? And then there's that core interesting aspect too that shows us what is the missing part. This is where we start to talk about the invisible part of the person. We know that when we die, 25 grams of physical mass is unaccounted for. It becomes part of the air. And this is basically what the inference is to our spirit. Science will call it energy, but we're all beings of energy. Yeah? Even when in that congealed physical form. Okay? Now, Whereas the physical form or the body decomposes into various states, notably carbon in various states, examples, rocks, stones, diamonds, as I earlier mentioned. This also is the second truth that we come to. This is one of the means through which we, those in African spiritual paradigms and frameworks, can use to communicate with the mineral kingdom, okay? Because it's made up of us. And those energies and information contained, or once upon a time contained within, can be accessed. So again, we can see where we have these assertions and understandings within African spiritual cosmologies, whereby we're able to have a direct communication channel with the mineral kingdom. Because in a sense, there's energies and information from people who have lived millennia to now. Now let's look at this 25 grams that disappears. And to date, modern science can't even tell us where it disappears to, why it disappears, or even what its constituent makeup is. Okay? And as I've already mentioned, in the African cosmological framework, we understand that missing energetic aspect to be what we can generally call our spirit self. Now, the inherent nature of human beings to always be in a transformative state references primarily that we are first and foremost spirit beings, beings of energy. So again, we are forces. And in each moment and second, we are agents of transformation for a range of systems within our very selves. The first one we can look at is the digestive system. Okay? And what the digestive system allows us to do is we're able to take in bioorganic mass that we call food, and that food then sustains our body. But then as this food, we are drawing out its nutrients, it goes through this system, this process we call the digestive process or system, and eventually leads to what we call waste. And there's even a bit of a conundrum there, because what we call waste is actually treasure for the plants and the vegetation, the same thing that we rely on for sustenance. Yeah, we then give them a treasure that we call waste, and then that helps them to grow and then feed us back. So again, remember in the first slide, we talk about the universe existing in a state of symbiosis. Yeah, just right next to us, we do that all the time. Again, some things sometimes, perhaps because they're so obvious and simple, we just never really pick up on them. Yeah. So in each and every second, we already have this transformative state existing within ourselves that we call the digestive system. But that's not the only one. The one I personally find the most fascinating is what we call the neural network or the mind, right? And its connection to our circulatory network and the whole of our body. And in a sense, keeping our very bodies alive. What I like about the neural network is because it makes very clear our essential state of transformation. Because you see the image that we see here on the left, where we see all what looks like static and bits of lightning bolts running through these ligaments or kind of cords and threads. That is the reality of your mind, the reality of your thinking. This is what's going on in your head as we speak. There is constant electric synaptic communication going on that then aids us. That A aids us in thinking, and B is transformed into the image on the right, what we call the shapes and the forms that we perceive in our external reality through these portals we call our eyes. Okay, what the actual shape and nature of our thoughts has no resemblance to what is then transformed into, because we see visuals when in reality there's only electricity really. So there's a transformation between the electrical communication from the left into a visual form that we perceive. That's another state of transformation. Something existing in one different state altogether and being transformed into another state. And this happens in perhaps the most important of our faculties, our mind. Yeah? It's what gives us our ability to form a perception of even our reality. This one I deem the most important, the respiratory system. Because the respiratory system is our direct connection to spirit and interface with nature. I say it's the most important because, you can hold your breath or you can try to hold your breath for about 10 minutes and call any name of any most high concept of God or a creator, you will die. Yeah, without that respiratory system, you will die. So even on a wild tangent, I could just flimsily call it that is God right there, because that's what keeps you alive. Yeah, and this respiratory system also evidences something very key that I've already touched on, which is the transformation of elements. So we breathe in oxygen that we take from the environment, and then that oxygen then once is exhaled, it's transformed into carbon dioxide, which is kind of toxic to us or waste, but then it's treasure for the plants and the vegetation. And this again references our symbiotic relationship with nature, because what we take in is useful to us, and what we give back out is also useful to them. And what we take in is transformed by the time it comes out. Yeah. And again, as I said, with our respiratory system, without it, all we have is an inanimate mass, a lifeless body. So that is the core transformative process that keeps us alive every second. Okay, so that 25 grams missing, let's look to the connection to spirit. Now, also touching further on the components of the universe, where there is the visible and the invisible aspect. So also in the African tradition, the understanding of what it means to be human exists in a duality. We have the body or the physical, and then we have the spirit. And both of these elements or both of these aspects of ourselves have to exist in a symbiosis. It has to exist in a balanced format. This is when we're living our holistic self. The holistic self is the state of balance between our bodies and our spirit. But what does that involve on a daily basis? Because in essence, if we're taking care of one aspect of ourselves versus another, this is where we have imbalance. And what imbalance can manifest as is bad luck, what you might perceive as bad things happening to you on a regular basis. Because there's an imbalance in the aspects of self. There's an imbalance in the totality of yourself, or rather how you're managing to keep a balance between all the aspects of yourself. And in reality, that's why and how this course was designed, to give us full understanding and comprehension. So in this first part, we're looking at the evidence that shows us that we're a force of nature and how to harness that force consciously, and to be able to use it in ways that we are born to use it, to bring about that balance in that holistic existence. Okay, because that's when we're operating at our full throttle. We've already looked at the evidence, 4 aspects of it, and then now we look at how we harness that energy. In part 2, we will be looking at conceptions of the creator within African cosmologies. And it is in this section that you actually start to see again how directly connected you are to this thing that most people, or to this concept rather, that most people call God or the creator or the creative source, because we can go beyond the universe in that regard. And part 2 shows us that very clearly. And it is also part 2 that will show us why we really miss the point totally when we start looking at African creation accounts as we do religious fables and allegories, yeah? Because they're not the same. And what we will show very clearly in part 2 is that what the African accounts detail are what we call scientific processes today, and notably of the mitosis or meiosis sort, where we're looking at concepts of cell regeneration and or duplication. Okay, and that goes deep, because then you see how it reflects back on you as a person, and that segues us nicely into part 3, which is about personhood. Because the African understanding of what we call a person or a human being is very, very broad and expansive. And we're going to learn about various aspects of ourselves that leads us into getting a better understanding of things like our emotional states, about how, we can step into different states of mind in different moments, and why this is so. Okay, because there are many aspects to the person. Part 4, we go even deeper, because among the aspects of the self is one core aspect, and perhaps the most important aspect, because all the other aspects rally around this aspect, which is called your spiritual double or your divine destiny, as a reason for why you're here. Okay, so you have your spiritual double that leads you into attaining your divine destiny. That's pretty much the nice sum up. That's part 4. Then we move on to part 5, which is about ancestorhood. Because not sure if you might be aware, but there's also an aspect of yourself which is like your ancestral guardian, the direct channeling to your ancestral line. Which is why when I hear the term epigenetics now, I smile a lot, because we're not going to wait for epigenetics to tell us what people from millennia have already identified, codified, and clarified. So we're not just breaking down what ancestors are, the familial types or the deified types, okay? And part 6 is where we go quantum, yeah? Where we've looked at the individual, the small, the microcosm, and then we end up in the wide, the all-encompassing, the Ubuntu universe, yes? And we will understand and see how come the very universe and the way it moves and operates reflects the African cosmological concept of Ubuntu. I've already mentioned many of it on the previous slides, where we talk about the symbiosis with nature that we exhibit as human beings. One core truth that you should already be quite clear about already as of now is the very fact that we are transformative beings. That is the science of life. I've shown very clearly in each and every state how we are processing many transformative states within the self. And we're able to do so because we're beings of energy. We're forces. We are forces of nature. So now I guess the question that will be on your mind is, what do we transform into? And really, what is the purpose of this transformation? How do we harness the force for transformation in a conscious and direct manner? Let's now find out.